Okay.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here to learn more about our wonderful new member who is like an old member, because boy, has he just taken a nosedive into the village process. I met Bruce about a year ago, and I've joined his book club. He's joined the village, and we just clicked. And he has been one of the best things that's happened to the village this year. And I would venture to guess that Bruce has probably done more volunteer work in less than a year than most of us do in a year. And I thank you for that, Bruce. And I'm going to let you take it from here and tell us all about yourself.
Okay. Now, can everybody see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
we should mute ourselves.
yeah, you can mute yourself if you want. Basically, I've got a little presentation just kind of going through the highlights, and then you can ask any questions or stuff. So, okay, I'm Bruce Christensen. Family background. I'm half from Great Britain and Ireland, half from Sweden and Denmark. My last name is Danish, and so that comes from my father's side of the family. I was born in Redlands, California. My parents lived in Yucaipa, and so I was raised in Yucaipa. That's about 70 miles east of here. And I just recently, I had a house out there that I sold a couple of years ago, but I've never really lived there. My education is, after graduating from high school, I went to Brigham Young University, and I have a bachelor's degree in marketing and an associate's degree in Spanish. During college, I went on 2 study abroads. I spent 6 months in Paris and 2 months in Guadalajara, Mexico. And also I spent a year at BYU's Hawaii campus stuff. So religiously, my family was Mormon, and they're part of the largest Mormon sect based in Utah. There's actually about 400 offshoot Mormon sects, but the big one that most everybody knows about. I was a practicing and believing member through my early 20s. When I was 19, I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years in Santiago, Chile. And that was from 1977 to 1978. And that was shortly after the military coup in 1973. I was neighbors with Augusto Pinochet, the dictator. My apartment was a couple blocks from his home, and our offices were 3 doors from his home. And so I regularly walked by, and the guards would, rack their machine guns just to rattle us. We knew they were just goofing around. Following my missionary service, I started to distance myself from religion, and that took a long time. I stopped attending religious services while I was in college, and except for Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, and family funerals, I have not been back to a religious service. Currently, I'm not religious any longer, and I'm fairly heavily involved with the ex-Mormon community in Southern California. Let's see. From the time I was little, I knew I was gay and attracted to men and boys. I had no exposure or understanding of what being gay was at all. This was in the 60s and 70s, and I grew up in a totally religious community, and I really didn't know anybody that wasn't Mormon. And it took me decades to kind of completely get myself out, both of religion and of the closet. I formally came out to everybody in my life, work, family, after I retired at age 57, and that was 8 years ago. Following graduation, I had several short-lived jobs in mortgage banking, credit analysis, and retail. And then I finally settled down in 1985 with Transamerica Occidental Life in downtown Los Angeles. That time I moved to South Pasadena in 1985. And the first 18 months I worked in the life claims department. And then I worked and managed people who wrote the insurance contracts and filed them with the various state insurance departments. for the majority of my career, I was a project manager in product development. I'm familiar with actuarial science, programming, marketing. So my job was to sit into meetings to make sure the actuaries, the programmers, and the marketing people had a clear understanding of what was going on in the project and that everyone was on the same page. I also manage sales software testing, budgets, access to computer systems, disaster recovery, birthday parties, baby showers, retirement parties. I was the go-to party guy. My family has always been rather unhappy with me because I wasn't religious, but they were never unkind. As my parents aged, I took over more responsibilities in their family business of renting apartments and houses. And for the last 20 years, I managed my parents' finances, business, and healthcare. My father died of colon cancer in 1980. I mean, not at age 80, in the year 2000. And my mother died of breast cancer, old age, at 94 in 2016. And I moved to my current apartment in Pasadena on California Boulevard in 2017. And let me show you, this is a picture from 2018 from our family reunion that I planned in Colorado. I did up this picture for somebody. This nephew died about a month ago, and that's his parents. I was trying to show somebody who had passed away. He was severely handicapped and he died at age 27. But these are all the descendants and spouses and grandchildren of my parents. Most of them belong to my oldest brother. He had 9 children, and my sister passed away when she was 35, and she had 1 daughter here, and she doesn't have any children. She's married. And then my brother that's still living is here with his wife, and they have 4 kids, and they have 6 grandkids. So the majority of all these people are my descendants from my oldest brother. And this is at the YMCA of the Rockies. We spent 4 days there in 2018. And so I have a very large family. Of this group, 75% are practicing or somewhat believing Mormons, and 25% are non-Mormons or former Mormons. And so we have a fairly diverse, family. And again, the basic description would be unhappy but not unkind. And so that's kind of, I met Karen and then Jeff and Wayne through one of the LGBT groups in San Gabriel Valley. And I found out about the village, and it seemed like a really good place to find community. And let me just share a couple of pictures. It's kind of interesting as you age, just going like, oh, I have not aged well. This is my, let's see. Let's see. Oh, stop sharing. Let's see if I can share this. This is my high school prom picture. And that was my high school girlfriend. We went to all the dances and on dates. We never kissed. We never did anything. So, but that was I think that was 1975 or 74. And so that was the least cringy tux I had. One other one was a blue brocade tux, and that didn't age very well. A plain black tux. Now that has faded a lot. I had a pink ruffled shirt and she had a pink dress on. So that was me in high school. And then let me just bring up. This was me in college. I took a photography class. That's me. I was 19 and it was up in Utah, and my lab partner was the one who took that photograph of me. And I have one last picture. I spent a year in Hawaii, and my roommate was a marine biology major, and he had an underwater camera. Now, this was in 1980, and waterproof underwater cameras. It was a Nikon camera with a big housing, and we had to borrow it from the university. But he took that picture of me and stuff. So that was me in my college years stuff. So I don't know. Any questions? Unmute yourselves. Talk.
Yeah. One of the questions, by the way, I love the prom picture. I can't see the pink, but I get the picture.
Well, that photograph has faded over the years.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
but what do you do? What are your hobbies? What are the things you do to bring joy and relaxation and smiles into your life?
Okay. I organize things. I have a games group that's been going for 35 years. When we were younger, we met every 6 weeks. We were all single. Several have gotten married. Some have gotten divorced. But now we meet quarterly on Zoom. One person lives in Wisconsin. One person lives here in Pasadena, but doesn't believe in vaccination. So now we meet on Zoom. I cook. I just took the bandage off my thumb. I was learning to make curries, and I sliced my thumb as I was chopping vegetables. I've got to go over, I've taken lots of cooking classes, go over my vegetable chopping technique so I don't chop my fingers off and stuff. So I like to do that. In the past, I have done some photography. I did black and white film photography portraits for a number of years. But when I retired, I gave all the portrait. I usually had 2 copies made. I gave one to the person, and I had one in my office. My last office ended up having all glass walls, so I didn't have any place to put them. And when I retired, I just gave them to the family members whose pictures that I had taken for them to distribute. There were pictures of their children and stuff. And I said, oh, I don't have copies for everybody, but let them pick the ones they want. So now my photography is basically iPhone, and I post on Instagram and stuff. So I'm much less involved in photography. My good cameras are 20 years old, which makes them almost, not practical to use anymore. So I do that. Yeah. Valerie, you had some questions?
I just had one. You mentioned that you stopped being an active Mormon. What made you change your mind about the religion?
Well, it was interesting going to Brigham Young University. Now they keep track of whether you go to religious services. And I kind of blame myself for them instituting that, because when I went there, they didn't. And I just went to Salt Lake, which was about 60 miles away, to the movies every Sunday. So basically, Mormonism is very anti-gay. Exact. For years, the kind of the group that was less than for the Mormon church were people of color, people with dark skin, specifically African Americans. They didn't allow African Americans to hold the Mormon priesthood or to have any leadership. And, you know, the big group that they consider less than is women. But once in 1978, when they decided to change the stance on African Americans, they kind of switched over to having the less than group that they pay attention to as being the gays and lesbians. And now they're just having a heyday with transgender people because that was more in the spotlight now. So when I came back from Chile, I realized that if I stayed engaged, I would probably get extremely depressed, and self-harm was in part of that. So I just, you know, I was in business school there, you know, it was very easy to just fly under the radar. And that's why I went to study abroad in Paris and Mexico, and I spent a year in Hawaii. I just kept kind of moving around, pursuing my degree, but kind of keeping off of everyone's radar. And my parents knew I wasn't very devout religious, and they would do anything to keep me associated. So they paid for schooling long beyond what I needed to graduate. I needed 128 semester hours, and I graduated with 178 semester hours. Because on all those study abroads, I took, you know, art history and, you know, just all that stuff. So yeah, just kind of to protect myself, I distanced myself. I still had my last attempt at a girlfriend was in 1983, and I had a good friend, but when it got to the point where, you know, we're going like, okay, we've either got to get married or do something, I called it all off because I'm going like, I can't do any of this. So that's kind of where I distance. Claire.
Bruce, I know that you have a group of friends, maybe a group that you actually run for people who have walked away from, been excluded from, been excommunicated from their faith traditions. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I organized the Los Angeles area post Ex-Mormon Meetup. And since the pandemic, you know, we met on Zoom. People are not as enthused about Zoom anymore, you know, and stuff. But one of the things that one of my friends started years before I got involved was, we call it the Southern California Interfaithless Beach Day. And interfaithless, yeah, because he started meeting with some ex-Mormons. Are you guys familiar with Setabello restaurant on Colorado Boulevard, kind of next to the old Roy's? It's a Neapolitan pizza place.
It's in Pasadena. Oh,
First side of Colorado, next to where Roy's, kind of a block
Oh, yeah, yeah,
down from the movie theaters.
yeah.
okay.
Block between the old
Just
Roy
next-
and Tender Greens.
Yeah, tender greens.
Yeah, and so Brad Otten, he was the USC quarterback in the 90s at the Rose Bowl. He was a missionary in Naples, Italy, and he liked Neapolitan pizza. And so he and his partner, once he, you know, got out of high school, I don't think he had a career in professional football, but they started a chain of Neapolitan pizza restaurants, and they have the blessing of the Neapolitan Pizza Association. And so it's very authentic. It's that real high temperature fired, very thin, and nothing like Domino's or Chicago style pizza. It's a different type of pizza. But they started meeting there and then kind of outgrew the location with ex-Mormons. This was before I knew anything about them. And they started meeting at the beach. And then the organizer, his name's Morris, he goes, there's got to be other people in other high demand religions that are in the same position. So he started reaching out to them. And so we do this a couple times a year. Last time was in May. We have ex-Scientologist, ex-Jehovah's Witness, ex-Orthodox Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, ex-evangelicals, Luz del Mundo. That's a kind of a cult out of Mexico where the apostle has been put in jail. We've had people from that come. And so we just kind of do, Morris likes to smoke ribs. We do about 10 racks of ribs, and then it's a potluck, and we just sit around and compare shunnings. And I've been involved for about 6 years, twice a year. And yeah, so that's kind of my formerly religious people contacts. And it's very interesting. We compare shunnings, and it's very similar. We compare the control techniques. It's very similar. I mean, each group, Scientologists will come after you leave and still try to ruin your life actively. Jehovah's Witnesses require complete shunning by your family and friends. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Mormons kind of are on a spectrum of shunning and stuff. You know, there's some that are quite adamant about it, others that are kind of mediocre, and then others don't shun at all. So it's more kind of interesting. I think it was 2017. NPR did an interview with us, and we were on All Things Considered. And then Vice Magazine the next year, I think it was 2018, did an article on our beach meetups and stuff. So they're kind of fun. I mean, it's very cathartic to meet with a bunch of people who have very different backgrounds, but have gone through very similar things and stuff. So yeah, that's my kind of post-religious community stuff. But with all this Omicron stuff, in the past I've gotten people together at restaurants, and every time that I'm ready to get a group together, there's another wave, and now in my world, several people I know, most recently my barber got COVID, and he won't tell me he's tested negative. He says, I'm following all the guidelines, but it would have been just earlier in the week that he could have possibly tested negative. So I postponed my haircut for a week or two because, I'm kind of skittish about things. So yeah, it's fun to get together. Sometimes you never know who you're going to meet. I've had people meet people they actually know from congregations, and they'll come to an Ex-Mormon gathering and find people from their congregation there, and you're going like, holy moly, what are you doing here and stuff. So that's kind of fun. So another question, Nancy. Let's see, you're muted.
There. This is a tough question to ask, and I hope I'm not misunderstood. Because I don't mean to be offensive in any kind of way. One of the core values of the village is we welcome diversity. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking these highly structured religious groups that you're speaking about that seem to have harsh, judgmental qualities. Mm-hmm. What would we do in the village if someone who was currently a member of one of these groups that you're describing, if they wanted to join the village, how would we approach that?
Oh, I don't think that that's a problem, because high demand religions, as part of the high demand nature, some people say cult nature, occupy your time and control your social group, who you interact with.
Right.
And in general, their believing members would be discouraged from a group like the Village.
I see.
I'm not sure, having only been involved a short while, but have we had any people from what would be considered very high demand religions?
Not that I'm aware of, and I really hadn't thought about that diverse group. I know that, or that particular population. I know that in our value statement, we have the word diversity, religious beliefs as one of the diverse populations that we would welcome. I'm not aware that we've ever had to make that kind of judgment.
Actually not sure that religion is included in the diversity statement.
I think it is.
I would assume that religion
Yeah,
is.
I would hope so. I mean, like in my beach meetups, we have a woman who was raised Hasidic Jewish and has run like an underground railroad for people getting out of her old community.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's in there.
Yeah.
Intentionally, and it was very much intended to have that be one of the diverse inclusionary aspects of the Village. And it never occurred to me to think about what you're describing with some religious groups who are very are in what you describe as shunning behavior.
Yeah. Generally, there's an exclusionary nature to the group where there's us and them. And from my experience, you don't find a lot of people seeking out an organization like the Village is a separate community where people from a high demand community would be seeking out the Village. Now, I was involved with Toastmasters for many years downtown LA. And the Church of Scientology definitely had its eye on trying to take over the Toastmasters organization.
I've never heard that before.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they didn't succeed. I mean, they were always in my area. So I always, did speech contests and stuff with them, but they were very good because they spent tremendous amounts of time doing presentations and stuff, but it never took off. But in talking to some of their members, that was their goal and stuff. But everybody that wasn't a Scientologist would just kind of roll their eyes because they would always offer their locations and free courses and stuff. And since I worked for a big company that at the time we owned our building, so I had access to large meeting rooms, cafeterias, security guards, so I could offer good downtown locations for free with all the amenities. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like the Jehovah's Witnesses discourage education because the end of the world is coming and there's no point to going to college and stuff. And so, and even among Mormons, like if you have a large family, everything that the Village provides is usually occupied and taken up by your extended family. If you have 7 kids or 10 kids and all the grandkids and stuff, you're not looking for a community to be part of. More of the modern, more, I guess I would describe progressive liberal groups. Like, I don't have children. My closest relative is 6 hours away. That's what the Village to me seems like, a perfect fit for me is a community that's not religious based, but we all have similar interests. We're all aging. We're all interested in having full lives as we age. And that's what I found in the community. So those are
I never thought, just this group that's here now. I don't know except for two people, or I know you three, I don't know what anybody's religious feelings are. It's never been, I never thought it was, it's a secular organization. And I
Right.
never thought that religion played a part in any way. So maybe we do have a member that is,
The Episcopalians subsidized it.
yeah. But it's just never been what I would consider an issue.
Yeah, less high demand religions like Episcopalian, Quaker, and even just, Presbyterian, you're less
Catholic.
less Orthodox Jewish groups and stuff, I think would find a place within the village, but it's not like possibly their whole life and purpose, where the high demand religions, they kind of occupy that place in people's lives. At least that's my viewpoint of it.
This morning I attended it was a village in Baltimore that is based for the Muslim community. And they did a presentation this morning. I think I was the only one from our village that attended. But I asked that very question because they had a Q&A afterwards. And I said, well, your village sounds wonderful and it's very connected to the community and it's intergenerational. But in our village, we are making strides with the LGBT community. How do they fit into your village? And basically the answer I got was, we're working it out. But because, their village just doesn't recognize that. And, but they said, we will always respect people and we welcome all people to our dinners and our breakfasts and our events. But they also interact with other faith-based villages and secular villages in their area. So I thought that was an interesting response. And I think even within our village, we probably have very many different views of many subjects, not just religion, but how you live your life. I mean, abortion is another issue that people may have very different feelings about, but we can come together and have that common humanity of aging well and being supportive.
I totally agree with what you're saying. Where it gets complex for me is that if you have a group of people who, as one of their core tenets, is hostile and shunning to other groups, then it gets a little bit tricky in terms of
Nancy, they wouldn't come.
They wouldn't even be. They probably wouldn't even be here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they would take one look around and head for the door as fast as they could.
You're not going to pay dues and be a part of us.
I interpret Bruce's meaning of shunning having to do with within the religion.
Yeah, right.
And once you leave the religion, you will be shunned. It has to do with outsiders.
Though, at least in the Mormon community, Mormons generally won't let their children play with non-Mormons. And if you are a Mormon in an area where there's enough Mormons, your dentist and your doctor are Mormons. Your insurance agent is Mormon. That's what my father did. There's a group nature to the religion.
Right.
But we also found, one of our neighbors was Southern Baptist, and on both sides, they didn't want their kids playing with my niece that my parents were raising, and my parents weren't overly thrilled that my niece was playing with their kids. Everybody was wanting to shun the outsiders in that groups, and especially when you have large enough numbers. Now, in the Mormon religion, Mormonism is different in Southern Idaho, Utah, and Arizona than it is in California. And then it's very different from Mormonism in Washington State and Washington, D.C. Because like in Washington, D.C., many of your Mormons are in government and political roles and much more, I guess would say cosmopolitan. And they're much, the congregations there readily accept gay people and stuff. The congregations in San Francisco are very opening and accepting. But in the Mormon corridor, which is southern Idaho, Utah, and Arizona, and then it extends up to Alberta, Canada, and down to Colonia Juarez in Mexico. And my father's family, who are the Mormons, they're on the outskirts in Manassas, Colorado, right on the northern border of New Mexico. That was a Mormon colony that my great grandparents were sent to colonize. So that in that corridor, you have a large percentage of Mormons. So people tend to stay within the group, socialize within the group and stuff like that. So Claire, did you have your hand up?
I have my hand up because I'm reading the website of the Pasadena Village, and under the topic, it just went away. Under the topic inclusiveness, it says, we create a welcoming environment where everyone is treated with respect, regardless of age, ability, race, ethnicity, economic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or political preference. The reason I said I didn't think religion was in there is because I mentioned it to Katie some months ago, and she said, yes, that statement needs to be updated.
Yeah, I think with high-demand religions, that group will self-segregate away from the
No. I'm not trying to pursue the conversation about high intensity, high demand religions. I'm just asserting a point, which is that faith, tradition, or religious belief is not included in our diversity segment. I just want people to know that.
Yeah, and I would think that in the village, we have a variety of people who go to, participate in different religions, but they're not the high demand nature. I mean, I've had people mention that they were members of All Saints, and I helped a friend put on a family funeral at All Saints many years ago. I would think, just my observation, most religions could coexist within the village just fine.
Yeah.
The ones that are considered high demand, and they would tend to exclude themselves. But it's always interesting what people's beliefs are. Even people who are outwardly religious, I've talked to some and they're going like, yeah, it may all not, be what I think, but I have family members with that discussion. So any other questions or comments?
Well, would you talk about your book club a little bit?
Oh yeah. I do help run a post Ex-Mormon book club, or anybody kind of interested in the topic. We started 2 years ago. We're just entering our third year in September. The organizer is a woman who was a BYU librarian, and she had to catalog some of the more interesting historical documents, and she would sit there and read them, and she started going like, I'm not sure this makes sense. And she wasn't a
he hung up. You hung up, so you have to start over.
Yeah.
Okay.
This image freezes every once in a while.
Yeah.
Oh, I get the message that my internet's unstable.
Yeah.
But I have a wired internet. I'm not using any Wi-Fi in my system. So, okay, so I'll start over on the book club. Is that a good place?
Yeah. Just talk about Rebecca and.
Do you have Spectrum? They seem to be really slow right now or something.
Yeah, I do have Spectrum.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the whole thing.
Yeah, so basically our book club, Rebecca was a BYU librarian, and then they started giving her problems when she had children, because Mormon women shouldn't work outside of the home
Oh.
and stuff. And so then she's always been interested in books and literature. She's kind of a typical Utah Mormon girl, big blonde hair, lots of makeup, you know, that's a typical Utah look. And she and her husband, I guess, are technically still members, but they don't go. He goes to a variety of churches. But she put a call out on Reddit is a bulletin board community. And when I started on Ex-Mormon Reddit, there were 25,000 ex-Mormons on the Reddit. Now there's 250,000. And that's kind of how we kind of communicate what's going on with each other. And she put a call out to people and said, anybody interested in a book club? And I sent her a message and I said, yeah. She goes, I know how to organize book clubs because I've done it for years, but I don't know how to do the technical Zoom thing. And I'm going like, oh, well, I have a Zoom Pro account. I know how to do Zoom meetings. And then we found a couple in north of Salt Lake that he was out and she was still in, but they were both interested. And so the four of us are kind of the leadership group. And we've completed 2 years. And we just did our book selection for our 3rd year. On our Facebook group, we have about 90 people who are members, but we have about 25 that actually show up to our discussions. And Karen and Jeff are 2 of the 25 who show up pretty regularly. In our discussions, we pick the major topics, and we're moving more and more away from anything related to Mormonism. Our book last month was The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And we've read Sam Harris's Free Will. We've read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. But then we've also read, like, one of the books was Escape from Camp 14, about a man who was born and bred inside a concentration camp in North Korea and escaped. And the one thing about Rebecca, she's really good about getting the authors to come and talk to us. We had one of the books that I recommended that really resonates with Mormons is the Book of Separations by Mirva Toves. And she came and spent 45 minutes with us on the book club, answering our questions and stuff. And we had the journalist who wrote Escape from Camp 14. The North Korea aspect is Landon, the husband of the couple that helps out, is a civilian contractor for the military. And he spends much of his time in North Korea, and even in the demilitarized zone. My understanding is that he builds airport infrastructure, but I'm not sure people need to go into the DMZ. So I'm not sure what he does. I sometimes question what he does, because it doesn't seem like airport infrastructure is exactly what he does. But he had read the book and thought it was really good. Yeah, we've got some Brené Brown and some just different authors that are quite popular in kind of, where do I fit in the world and how does that work for me? That's the question I'm always answering. So we do it once a month. And then we also have added a book club for dummies, and on a Tuesday night. So we had somebody give a presentation on how to order coffee and what it all means, because Mormons don't drink coffee. And so, we had somebody come on and say, this is a latte, this is an Americano, this is the. Personally, I tried to like coffee, and I like it if it is dessert. I'm diabetic, and I'm just going like, I can't put that much sugar and cream in something to just drink. I can have a whole dinner for what one, fancy Starbucks drink is in calories and sugar. So I don't, I don't drink coffee just because without all the crap in it, it doesn't taste very good to me. But we've done on how to deal with your family that are believers. We've done, the Mormon Church was sued by a prominent member from the Huntsman family. John Huntsman was like the first Mormon billionaire in petrochemicals. And then his son was governor of Utah and then ambassador to China. And that guy's brother is a film distributor and producer here in Los Angeles. And for years, he was a believing Mormon and paid millions and millions of dollars in tithing, and then found out that the church wasn't doing what they said with it. And so he sued them. And so we had a guy in our group who was a lawyer who kind of explained the lawsuit and where it's at. And so just kind of, interesting. I don't know if any of you saw on Hulu, Mormon No More. It was like a 4-part series of 2 lesbians that have 7 children in between them, and they got married. They live in Huntington Beach, and that's been very popular on Hulu. Well, we've gotten, and actually it's tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not going because I have my dinner group tonight. But they have the mother of one of the women who, when her daughter came out and started dating this other Mormon woman, that woman and her husband were believing Mormons, and now they're out of the Mormon church. And so that woman is coming on to our Ex-Mormon for Dummies meetup just to talk to the group. So Rebecca is really good about reaching out to authors. Sometimes they don't come on, but we send them lists of questions and they'll respond back, and they're very engaged that, a book club is reading their book. So yeah, the book club is one of my favorite. I had one outing that I didn't attend because I was just too freaked out by COVID. But in 1857, on September 11th, the Mormons in southern Utah killed a wagon train of people from Arkansas and killed them all. Rebecca's ancestor was listed as a person who was responsible for clubbing people to death that were getting away. And many people in our book club are descendants of the murderers from that thing. So the book club took a field trip down on the anniversary, and they were able to meet the descendants of the wagon train. And what's really weird is there's one group of descendants from the wagon train that are Mormon now. And, it just was freaky, but they were able to connect, and we did a live Zoom from that location just north of St. George, Utah. Yeah, that was very successful. But that book was called The Blood of the Prophets, and Will Bagley, who wrote it, we tried to get him to come on, but then, in contacting him and his people, they said he's not doing well, and he died a few weeks later. He was in an assisted living and stuff, but he did all the research, and he knew we were doing it, and we were in contact with him. So yeah, this is the first book group I've heard of that has a fairly even amount of men and women, and has lasted 2 years. And everybody is quite engaged. We have a professor of accounting at the University of Illinois Champaign who has access to Qualtrics, the surveying software. So he does all this stuff, and we pick out the 12 categories we want, and then we each nominate books and organize them, and then we have a kind of a rank order. You have 10 points in each category for the books, and you can vote, whatever way you want. And then we kind of total that up, and we had a whole lot of really good books on the list, but we have to whittle them down to 12 because, you can only read so much and discuss so much if anybody wants to read on the side. But yeah, the book club is really one of the highlights of my life and stuff. So any other questions? We're at
Ruth, could we have a computer for dummies class at the village? I was doing the DMV. You can do the test online, but you
Uh-huh.
have to take this mini class. And I
Uh-huh.
get to almost the end, and all of a sudden my computer screen zooms out, so everything's enormous, and I couldn't
Oh,
match the things. And so
Oh.
I just got out. I mean, I kept hitting the out
yeah.
button, and I'm going, oh. And then the other day I tried to get my, what do you call it? Real ID. And I put in my I finally figured out how to drag and drop the 3 pieces of information. Well, it doesn't like one of them. So it emailed me that it didn't like one. And then
Oh,
I had to go back in, and then it went through the questions again. And the second time through the questions is even more ridiculous than the first. What kind of a license you want? A regular driving license, right? And then it says, do you want an ambulance license? No.
Maybe you should have said yes.
well, I got my real ID before the pandemic, and I had to go all the way out to Banning on the way to Palm Springs to find an
Wow.
appointment. And I had to take the original documents out there.
Yeah, yeah.
That happened to be the DMV where I took my driver's test when I was 15 and a half.
Uh-huh.
And the lady goes, I mentioned that to her. She goes, oh yeah, this is a much different DMV, because at the time it was just the little most sleepy, there were like 3 people there, and then I did my driving test, and now it was, standing room only.
Yeah.
Very busy, because Real ID at the time they were threatening to require it, and I don't know if they do require it any longer.
Oh, yeah, they do. It's going to be 2023. But you know what? I said to myself, well, what if you're not a real person anymore? Wouldn't that be nice? I can be a ghost.
Well, I still get all this mail from my parents. We had a family PO box for about 50, 60 years. And I took it over when I had my house out there, and then I just transferred it to here. But my brother and his wife had used that PO box. My parents had, and so everybody thinks that those addresses have moved here to Pasadena, and so I get lots of junk mail. And I'm going like, my mom would be 101. Chances are she doesn't want to hear from the Republican Party. So
That's funny. That's funny.
PJ, if you would like to be in touch with the DMV ombudsman for seniors, she came and talked to Pasadena Village, and I can put you in touch with her if you want.
Well, let's see how
DMV
this
help.
goes. I have an appointment for Tuesday, and I got my documents.
Oh,
I
okay.
think what happened is I scanned, and I have to scan so much for my son that lives in Australia. I have it on black and white.
Oh,
And I think I scanned my passport on black and white.
yeah,
before I
that may
realized-
have,
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I
you know,
don't know how to get in and fix it. And so I'm just gonna say, you know what? I'm just gonna say, look, I'm sorry, my computer did it. Or maybe Spectrum did it. I don't know who did it.
yeah, it's really hard to tell, because those things can be challenging. Like, Valerie, I was trying to sign up for the 1440 newsletter.
Oh,
And I tried on my iPad with kind of a throwaway email address, and they didn't like that. And then I tried using my real email address. They didn't like that. So I sent them an email, and I'm saying, look, I'm trying to subscribe, because Valerie mentioned that this 1440 newsletter, what 1440 was the year that the printing press was invented. It's a curated news feed that seems to be really good, with much less political bias in it, and stuff. So I was trying to sign up for that. I sent them an email yesterday saying, it says they can't verify my email address. And I mean, well, how do you do that? So any other stuff? It's 3
Very
o'clock.
interesting. Yes, very interesting, Bruce. Thank you. Thank you.
it was wonderful. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
thank you.
Well,
So yeah, this was great. And we've got more of these member connections coming up, so stay tuned. And Bruce, I thank you so much for participating in this and letting us get to know you better. A lot of people have gotten to know you in the short time you've been a member because you're out there doing stuff. And we really appreciate that. But this was like a whole nother, several different dimensions of you. And
Yeah.
that's really nice.
I keep wondering, is it TMI? But
No. It was all great. It was all great. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. That's
Oh.
terrific.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
we'll see you
Yeah.
guys around the village.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Yep, you will.
okay,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
It was a great presentation.
Yeah.
Good job, Karen.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out what to do with the recordings. I can't even see.
Oh.
Okay. Pause.